Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here live to talk to you all fine folks about all different things that happened on Friday night with the Buffalo Bills beating the Pittsburgh Steelers 9-3 in a riveting battle that I am sure each and every one of you stayed up to watch the very end of. And did not check out immediately as soon as you saw Mitch Trubisky was starting. But if you didn't, we can help you recap all of that here with you. In addition, we'll break down the game. We'll talk about all sorts of news, and there is plenty of Bills-related news, most of it bad, to talk about tonight. Before we do any of that, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, and I'm one of those people that did not check out and watch every single second of that game, partially because I had a money line bet on the Bills, who were underdogs heading in, so that was a nice little payday at the end of the game. It's football. I like football, so I watch football.
Nothing says everything is totally fine quite like betting on preseason football.
I love
that
is preseason football.
Tim here says, "Nice hat, Uber. Go Bills." Very nice hat, actually. It's a different hat, but it is a nice hat. It was not a very. It's like I shouldn't say it wasn't an entertaining game, at least to me, because I did enjoy actually seeing the defense play well and especially early on, right? Like watching that defense really take it to this Steelers offense, which was playing their starters. And, one of the strengths of the Steelers was their young but talented offensive line, and they kind of just got worked over up and down pretty much the entire game, which was very good to see, especially after last week's effort against the Bears, just not really inspiring a whole lot of confidence in general. This was a nice bounce back from what we saw last week, so that was a good thing to see. I would have also liked to see Josh Allen, but I also am fine with not seeing Josh Allen get hurt, which you might say, but David, that's so paranoid. Oh, but wait until you hear the laundry list of injuries we have to go through. But before we get to that, we have to talk about one thing, and that one thing is going to have a strange looking graphic that goes with this that I tried very hard to resize but could not figure out how. So for $60 a year, you can hold on, wait, no, go there. I'm gonna go to the other side. There we go. Oh, this actually works perfectly. This is great. Okay, so for $60, I'm not gonna be able to get through this just because I'm laughing. All right, for $60 a year, you can support us here at Cover One directly. It is the most direct way of doing it. It is the best way to support us. You get the best Bills content you can find out there. You get access to our exclusive Discord. You get in-depth analysis. You get scouting reports, analytics, members-only content, all that fun stuff. Discord in particular is probably the biggest draw. If you are so tired of being on social media, if you're tired of being on Twitter /X or whatever during games, and you're tired of all the stuff that comes with that, go do this, sign up for it. There's all sorts of people there that are there to enjoy the Bills, to enjoy the game day atmosphere, and not be dragged down by a whole bunch of mindless nonsense. So go subscribe to Cover One Pass. It is the best thing you can do if you're a Bills fan. It is extremely worth it, I guarantee you. And that's not a legal guarantee, by the way. So if it doesn't work out, I hold no responsibility for that. Anyway, sign up for One Pass today. Appreciate all of you. And we're back to normal.
We made that work.
You know what? Honestly, totally here for this now. Yeah. There's like literally just enough room on either side. I you know what? Blessing in disguise. That's what I'm calling that from now on. This might be. We're not going to start here because we have a bunch of news that we have to go through first. But as James LeClaire brings up here, we will be talking about Buffalo Joe. Don't you worry about it.
Yes.
Tim says we nailed it. I agree. We did nail that at Reed. I think that was very demure, very mindful of our surroundings. Just like it's very appropriate for what we need to do. Yeah. So we're gonna jump into news to start things off. So first thing, right off the top, most unfortunate thing, unfortunately. Matt Milano, torn bicep, out for multiple months. Not fun. Not great. Pretty depressing to see that come in when it happened. Really was hoping that when this was initially reported that he got taken off the practice field, like, okay, something happened. Something always happens to Milano, right? Something happens. But most of the time, it's not a season-ending thing. And this time it was. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And the Bills have made efforts in the last couple of years to kind of re-solidify their linebacker position where they're not just caught completely flat-footed, but it's still tough no matter how much you try to reinforce that position with younger guys to just lose a genuine all-pro linebacker who has been a centerpiece and cornerstone of your defense for as long as this coaching staff and front office have been here.
Yeah, and he's just one of those super unique players where, like, I think you could lean on him to win you a game, essentially. Like, he can make such game-changing plays at points that he could single-handedly win you a game, and to lose a player of that caliber, like, you can't replace them. And I was talking to a buddy this week, and I was like, imagine if the Chiefs lost Chris Jones. Like, that's close to how big this is to the Bills. The difference is it's happened in the preseason. For Buffalo, they have time to pivot, and they actually have some decent depth at linebacker. It's still a massive, massive, massive blow to the Bills, but, like, we played it pretty well without him last year after the Bills were able to adjust following the bye week and figure out how to make their defense work. I have a little faith in the Bills coaching staff that they can figure it out, but it's nonetheless a big deal for this defense.
RJ says, are the Bills the most injured team in the history of sports? Because it sure feels like it. It does feel like it, especially the way the last couple of years have gone. Especially last year, right? Where you just had this deluge all happen at once between Trey White in week 4 and then Milano and Daquan Jones going down in week 5. And then, like, kind of got lucky that Taron Johnson didn't go along with it because that I remember that happening. I was like, if he goes down too, there's literally no coming back from this. There would have been no way. And it's funny because to kind of just bring up Taron Johnson, I believe it was Mina Kimes over the weekend was like, pretty sure this Taron Johnson guy is like one of the best players in the NFL, which is correct. And many of us have been saying this. And beyond that, right, like we talk about, or at least we've talked about the fact that if Josh Allen goes down, this team is fucked, and there's no point in trying to discuss otherwise. If Taron Johnson goes down, that's about the most brutal thing that can happen to this particular defense with the way that it's constructed.
Yeah, they need him. It's just his versatility and his ability to just dominate that nickel position and dominate in the slot. Like, I don't know what you do if he goes to, like, Daquan Hardy's an interesting prospect that I'm like, hey, he's a nice backup to Taron Johnson. But to your point and to Mina Kimes' point, like, Taron Johnson's that dude. Like, he's that good where you lose him in a similar manner you lose Matt Milano, you're not going to replace him. And this defense just can't survive losing Taron Johnson in that critical role.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And it's hard to lose someone like Matt Milano for all the reasons we said earlier. But Taron Johnson just does so many different things and allows them to stay in nickel as much as they do. It would just completely change the whole face and identity of the defense. So, yeah, that injury report broke my soul. Yeah, I'm right there with you, RJ. Yeah. Gut punch, as James Leclerc puts here. It's not fun, but unfortunately, there's more. So Mitch Trubisky has a knee injury. He is out multiple weeks. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who had a pretty severe looking injury, it seemed like. Thankfully, he was able to walk off, which is surprising when you consider that the injury was a neck injury, as we learn now. A bit odd that he could just walk off. But hey, you know what? If they let him walk off, good. That's a good thing. He'll be out multiple weeks at least. Quentin Morris, who is the third tight end and has been the third tight end for this team for a while, he is out multiple weeks as well with a shoulder injury. Damar Hamlin has a hamstring injury and is week to week. Curtis Samuel has turf toe and is also week to week. Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop. So these are guys who have been injured and I believe are trying to work their way back. Right?
Yeah, there's I think they were doing walkthroughs today, both of them. So they're close, that's a good sign. So that's a good
sign. That makes me feel confident in one or the other or both being available in week one. I would assume that neither will play in week 3. I could be wrong. Maybe they use that as an opportunity to just sort of ramp them up for a series or two, get them used to game speed again. Hard to say. There's a case to be made either way. Javon Solomon and Casey Toohill, right?
Yeah. I'm not even sure of their injuries. Like these are newer ones that were reported. Yeah. I don't think they seem to be a big deal. But yeah, Javon Solomon and Casey Toohill both banged up.
Right. Bail Inspector, I feel like every preseason since he's been here, we've just been, there's just whatever injury affects Bail Inspector this year. There's always some sort of injury, it feels like. Nicholas Morrow, who was signed during the offseason, and Austin Johnson as well, both dealing with injuries. Not great, not fun, not things that I want to see. It's I don't like any of this, man. I don't like it because at this point, with this many people that are out or presumably out, or people that you want to be cautious with that are probably out, what do you even do for this third preseason game? As T-Dobbs says here, they need to cancel the last preseason game. Just clear it with the NFL, keep them safe, can't even afford to lose their shirts. I don't know about that, but I also don't totally disagree with that notion either. But this is the thing. Like when you look at teams like the Rams, like since Sean McVay has been there, I don't think he's ever played starters during any preseason game, and he's looking at this being like, I mean, I'm not saying I'm always right, but I am right here. And there are other teams that play their starters. Obviously, Kansas City has played Mahomes every preseason, not every preseason game necessarily, but he's played at least one game during the preseason every year. It's just unfortunate. There's only so much. These aren't like things that are totally preventable. We're not talking about like a bunch of soft tissue injuries or something that got pulled because they didn't stretch or whatever. We're talking about this torn bicep that happened during individual drills. Like what's a guy to do? What's somebody supposed to do with this? Mitch Trubisky knee injury. I mean, that in itself was kind of the reason why he was playing and Josh Allen was not. And as some people are saying here, Curtis Samuel probably is the most concerning one that isn't Matt Milano, at least, right? Because turf toe is something that can linger throughout the season. As Lauren brings up here, turf toe definitely concerns me. Roy Collins, Samuel having turf toe is something that affects players all season. Ask Hardy how his season went with turf toe. Yeah, it's not great. And especially, right, as RJ says here, already not a position with a lot of players. It's a thin group at wide receiver. And Samuel's supposed to be a big part of this group.
Yeah, and it just had me thinking this. Are Matt Milano and Curtis Samuel, and I might just be forgetting something, are Matt Milano and Curtis Samuel the two biggest injuries that have happened this offseason in the NFL? You got Hollywood Brown, which I would say is on par with Curtis Samuel.
What when you say biggest, do you mean like most notable, like talent-wise?
Like a talented player that a team lost or is going to lose for an extended period of time?
There's some...
I can't remember one of the injuries, but...
I mean, there's whoever that rookie corner was for the Vikings, and also, their rookie quarterback as well.
Oh, true. JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Vikings also
Same
dealing with really bad injury luck through this training camp and preseason. It's not just the Bills, even though it does feel like it's just the Bills. Honestly, the Vikings are an example of it could be worse because Sam Darnold could be the starting quarterback. And I don't want to see that. I'm already going to be annoyed at the fact that Sam Darnold's going to be the starting quarterback, and I'm not even a fan of anyone in that division. I'm just annoyed at that this is happening in the year of our Lord 2024.
I mean, honestly, as a Bills fan, though, it's kind of a good thing, right? Like, let them think that Sam Darnold can do it, and make that second round pick a 33rd overall pick.
Why not? Right? They won't be the worst team in the league, unfortunately. All right. In addition to all of the terrible, awful, no good, bad days of injuries that the Bills have had, on top of that, Bills are signing Anthony Brown, who is a quarterback. This per Tom Pelissero on Twitter. Normally, these sorts of tryouts and signings happen on Tuesday. They happened today because of the fact that they're kind of just at the end of the line when it comes to who can even be available. They had to sign Ben DiNucci last week because of an injury to Shane Buechele, who was on the team. Then, now DiNucci is the backup quarterback right now, which is another terrifying thought. But if it was good enough for the Cowboys, it's good enough for the Bills, though, right? Yeah, that's totally it. Anthony Brown is now on this team as quarterback. Chase Claypool was given an injury settlement. He is no longer on the team. He has been released with that settlement. I know this was a player that people were potentially excited about. I never really bought into the hype, even when some beat writers were trying to sell us on this easily looks really good during minicamp. It's like, yeah, he should, because he's like 6'6" and bigger than everyone else. It'd look really weird if he wasn't looking good there, but that's neither here nor there. It's not surprising to me that Claypool got this and is no longer on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think, I was hoping that Claypool would have found something else in Buffalo, and I thought maybe a practice squad spot would have been fine for him. Maybe you call him up in an emergency, but the injury kind of knocked him out of the running for that, and at this point he's cut. And as Lauren points out, I wonder if Claypool even signs with another team. It's crazy to think that his NFL career might be over, because it was just a few years ago he was being dubbed the the Maple Megatron, which was looking back on that now, how rude was that to Calvin Johnson?
Calvin Johnson, yeah. He had this great game against the Eagles where he scored 4 touchdowns and had a pretty good rookie season on top of that, but I think a lot of the hype around him kind of centered around that one game and the fact that he was on the Steelers, and the Steelers had this reputation of they just always find wide receivers. And then that particular line of thinking has just gone by the wayside, as the Steelers, I mean, they have George Pickens. That's kind of it for them right now. They have it because they did go on a run for a long time, right? Where they had Emmanuel Sanders and then Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant before he kind of drove his career off the road, and some other guys who played well for them, and some guys that were Juju, right? I mean, that was another example, especially early on, of wow, this dude can really be something, but it just never quite. They haven't had that same level of success. And I think Chase Claypool, especially being taken in the second round, right? Yeah, that was sort of the point where I think people started to be like, maybe the juice has run out on this particular narrative with Steelers, but that's whatever. In some other not quite so Bills related news, Patriots edge defender Matt Judon was traded to the Atlanta Falcons for a 3rd round pick. Judon wanted a new contract from New England, went to Atlanta. They have not agreed to a new contract yet. Judon said, I don't need to worry about that right now. I got to earn it, which is interesting. Kind of makes it seem like he wanted out of New England for more than just a contract, because I would imagine that New England was willing to do something about it, right? It's not, they've been paying their players plenty of money this offseason, right? Kyle Duggar, Christian Barmore, among others. It would surprise me if they didn't at least give Judon some money, even if they weren't going to commit to him long term, because he's like, what, 32 now?
Yeah. He'll be 30. I think he'd be 32 this year. Oh, he turned 32 4 days ago. So
So I it's a little odd. I think it's a decent enough return for them, especially for a team that kind of just needs to continuously keep going back to the draft to bring in new guys and help rebuild this roster. But it's just a bit of an odd exit for this guy, who is probably one of the 3 or 4 most important players for that defense, and now he's no longer on the team.
Yeah, and that's exactly where, like, I did my write-up on the Patriots 2 weeks ago, and I talked about Matt Judon, and I talked about Christian Barmore as 2 of the most important players, along with Kyle Duggar, and a couple, and Christian Gonzalez. Right. But Matt Judon he's the pass rush. Like, that's what he is. He is the whole pass rush for that team. And now that he's gone, and Barmore's also dealing with blood clots, like, that defensive line went from having 2 elite level talents, because Judon, when he's healthy, he's an elite pass rusher, and Christian Barmore is right up there, in my opinion, with the Ed Olivers of the world. So you have those 2 players now. We don't know if Barmore is going to play, and Matt Judon isn't on this team anymore. Like, that defensive line is bad, and that defense, which was the strength of the team, is now gone from being possibly a top 10 unit, even top 5 unit, to I don't even know if they're top 16 at this point without those 2 players. So yeah, it's a big deal that they traded him. It's a good thing for the Bills too. Like, I'd rather not face Matt Judon. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I felt like the Patriots by the end of the season could be a spicy kind of, don't really want to play them type of team, largely because of the defense, though. So now that you lose one of your most important players and really your primary pass rusher, the teeth of this defense doesn't look quite as strong as it did. And it's not like the offense is going to supplement that in any way, because the offense is rebuilding and reconstructing, and they got to deal with that. But I'm all for it, because it means that the Patriots are just easier to deal with. And also because, I like the Falcons. I would like to see Raheem Morris be successful in year 1. And they desperately needed literally any sort of pass rusher.
Yeah.
So it's funny that Matt Judon gets traded to the Falcons, who their last great pass rusher was probably John Abraham back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And meanwhile, you've got the Jets with Hassan Reddick, where there's been no movement, no news, no nothing from what I've seen from either side. And their last great pass rusher was also John Abraham back in the 2000s. So am I wrong? I have not seen a single thing about Hassan Reddick almost since like the middle of last week.
Yeah, it's gone radio silent. I don't know why. It seems like the weirdest thing that suddenly become completely weird. Quiet. Yeah.
Like, you would think somebody would be coming around. I mean, it's not like the Jets are some bastion of secret keeping or anything like that. You would think somebody would be leaking something or trying to do something in the media. I don't know. It's a bit odd that it's just gone from this very like main character type of storyline to nothing is happening. Nothing is going on. There's no war in Ba Sing Se. There's nothing bad happening. It's a little odd, and it's something to monitor. Anyway, that's it. That's all that we have for news. We'll go into some comments now, though. Just tip canoe. Hey, fam. Hey, just the tip of canoe. The Patriots are stacked with cap room next year, which is true, but that's next year, and they're going to have to suffer through another bad season this year, which brings a certain level of bitter joy to me. Bitter just because I'm bitter and I like seeing bitterness in Patriots fans who now have to experience what losing is like, and it's like, whatever, deal with it. I had
what
to
being
watch
an
it for,
NFL fan is like.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, you went from being the spoiled children of the NFL to now you have to realize what the real NFL world is like. Sucks to suck, doesn't it? Walter S says that Morris injury is very concerning too. He's a legitimate depth option at tight end and a decent red zone target. Knox hasn't been the healthiest player in recent seasons, so now that spot is a concern, in my opinion. And that's a good point. I mean, we've mentioned before, if you're going to run 12 personnel, you need 3 tight ends because you need to have a third guy available if one of the other guys goes down. And Knox has not been healthy the last couple of seasons, and that's definitely derailed his production in his seasons. And Quentin Morris has been a viable replacement, right, at this level. But now him going down for at least multiple weeks is concerning. You do have Zach Davidson, who has had a good training camp from what I've heard, and that's good, but I'm still iffy about the fact that like he might have to be tight end 3 to start the season.
Yeah, I'm not excited about Zach Davidson necessarily because I haven't seen him do anything in the NFL like in a legitimate manner. In the preseason, that's a whole nother story. We've seen some people have great performances in the preseason and fail miserably in their NFL careers and vice versa. Yeah, I'd rather have Quentin Morris at this point. Like I know what he's capable of, and it's fine. And especially for a tight end 3, I'm okay with fine. I'd rather have fine than an unknown in a situation where we might need to use them. And the Knox, health issues are a serious conversation that makes sense to have because he's even, I think, dealing with like a calf injury right now too already. So yeah, it just stinks that the depth is getting eaten up by all these injuries.
Yeah. Roy Collins says, considering Morris had 2 catches for 1 touchdown last season, I think Davidson could do that. Special teams might be a different story. And that's another part of this, right? Is, when you're talking about depth guys getting hurt, your special teams is the thing that probably takes the biggest hit from an on-field perspective, because now you're just having to shove another guy up there, and maybe he hasn't practice with that first unit as much, and it's tough. It's tough to really deal with special teams injuries. I remember in 2010 when the Packers made their run to the Super Bowl with McCarthy and Rodgers, and they had a ton of injuries, and they had a year or a game rather against New England, and that was the kickoff return that Dan Connolly had, the big line where that made it all the way down to the 5. And if you look at the replay on that, you see where it opens up and why. It's just this fill-in guy on special teams because they had so many injuries, just comes like everybody else is kind of moving like this towards the ball. And then one guy just comes like that and just like crashes into another guy. And Dan Connolly's just expecting someone to hit him. He's like, all right, no one's hitting me. I got to go. Yeah. Dude, still one of the greatest plays in history. I don't care that it was the Patriots.
That's why I blame Madden for so much of like NFL roster building discourse and the ridiculous and around it, because when you play Madden, it's just, oh yeah, whatever players on special teams are on special teams, and no one ever thinks about it. And it truly is a skill set and something you need to learn how to do correctly, because you have to do your 1/11th on that play, and to put out inexperienced people or to put out starters to some extent is something you don't want to do. So special teams plays a big role for those, deep depth guys like tight end 3 in this regard.
For sure. RJ says, I can't wait for the trust fund fan base in Kansas City to finally get humbled like Pats fans. May take 25 years at this point, though. Yeah, and maybe we're still doing this podcast in 25 years. Imagine 25 plus years of doing this show.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to make it 25 years.
I mean, your liver definitely won't.
Yeah, it won't. Okay. Yeah,
it'll be fine. It's funny that like Kansas City has just become this has just become the villain, right? Because that's what happens when you're as successful as they are. But like that franchise was so bad for so long. Yeah. They were just like either bad or just irrelevant, right? Like even in the 2000s where they were like successful and they had a lot of good running backs and a lot of like solid teams, they were just like, they're just not going to go anywhere. Like, and they didn't. And yeah, it's just kind of funny how quickly that turns around. And that's what happens when you get the greatest quarterback talent of all time with one of the best head coaches of all time. Weird how that works.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anything else? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else we need to talk about specifically here. Should we just move on to the game and what happened there?
Let's do it.
Let's start with Buffalo Joe, Mr. Joe Andreessen, the man, the myth, the legend, future Hall of Fame starting linebacker of the Buffalo Bills. Not really. So Joe Andreessen had a really good game though. Like all things considered, it was first of all, it was very surprising to see him starting. Initially. I was like, because I saw number 44 out there, I'm like, I thought Tyler Matakevich was on the Steelers. Why is this guy? Oh, right, Joe Andreessen. Okay, I'm with you now. But it was interesting because as right off the bat, you just saw this pressure from him because they brought a blitz right off the bat. And from there on, he looked like he belonged. I'm not going to sit here and say it was like some Hall of Fame type of performance or like this guy is going to be the guy in the future or anything like that. It was a guy who got his opportunity and definitely, I think, made the most of it, given what we expected out of him, what his skill set is. I think that's all a pretty impressive start for someone who, came in as just a long shot to make the roster. And now we're in a position where, especially with the injuries, considering, right? Like, we're now thinking like, this is probably linebacker 4 right now.
Dude, yeah, that's why. And honestly, that's my favorite part about preseason is finding these guys that like they get an opportunity and they absolutely shine in it, or they do enough to earn a job and ultimately earn generational wealth or earn money that's absurd, because that's what happens to these guys is they go from making what probably would have been like $50,000 at a normal job to suddenly $600,000, like crazy money. And to watch him perform, like I think my first tweet during that game that I had was, is he starting? What do we do? Why is this guy starting? And then all of a sudden was like, wait, he's actually doing well. And then he just kept doing well throughout the game. It's not like he didn't have faults though. There was a couple misdirections he completely whiffed on. Like he just went the exact wrong way. So I think this kind of concept that, he's incredible is a bit overblown. That being said, I did not go into this preseason at all expecting him to make the roster. I thought that his upside, the best thing that could possibly happen, was practice squad, and that still was going to be a long shot. I don't know how you keep him off the 53 now. I'm not saying he's a starter. I'm not saying he's a primary backup, but like after that performance, like you said, he looked like he belonged. And to some extent, we talked about Baylon Spector and his injuries earlier. Like if Baylon Spector can't stay healthy, how much of a downgrade is Joe Andreessen to Baylon Spector? And is the coaching staff just like, you know what? We've tried it with Baylon for years. He can't stay healthy. Like, let's try to get him on the practice squad. Let's give this Buffalo kid a shot at the 53. And I truly think it's to a point now where I am expecting him to be on that 53-man roster come week 1.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Greg kind of put it well when this was all taking place. Is like, I think I knew who Joe Andreessen was because there were people like, it's so cool. There's this Buffalo guy who grew up in Lancaster and, is now getting his opportunity to at least be on the team during training camp. And it's like, okay, it's a cool story, whatever, but that's not going to matter. And now we're sitting here like, he got his opportunity, made the most of it.
Yeah.
Injuries are now playing a role in this, but this is good, right? Like, I mean, this is for an undrafted guy who's undersized, right? Like, this is a perfectly reasonable player based on what we've seen. to have on your roster.
Mhm.
And that's the most you can ask out of an undrafted guy.
Yeah,
And especially considering the injuries that are happening, this is a very nice and pleasant development around all the other crap that's going on.
Yeah, it's not just it's not just a good story. It seems like he's a quality player you can put on your 53. And the one play that keeps standing out to me, he had a tackle on the right side. He was getting blocked by James Daniels, who is a solid NFL offensive lineman. James Daniels also much bigger than Joe Andreessen. Andreessen handled the tackle, got off, or handled the block, got off of it, and then just went and made a tackle in space, a solo tackle, dealing with a stiff arm. It was just a play that I looked at and I'm like, NFL linebackers make that play, and this kid just made that play on 2 starters on the Steelers team. Like, yeah, it's not just a good story. Like I said, it's a good. The Bills might have found a good undrafted free agent to make this roster.
Michael Donnelly says Eric's breakdown of Andreessen was incredible. Kudos to Eric. Eric always has great breakdowns, and if you don't watch them, go do that because he's got stuff right. Listen, if you want to see what Joe Andreessen's game was like, go watch that. It's right here on the Cover One YouTube channel. If you want to see Dorian Williams and him and Anthony break him down, go for it because he's got that available to you as well. This is what we do here at Cover One. We are here to provide you with answers to as many questions about the Bills as we possibly can give. And when there's, another injury to happen, knock on wood, hopefully. Oh, God, knock my camera down. That was not on there all that well, apparently. My God, that was terrible. Ugh. All right, you talk while I fix this.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Dorian Williams, so the thing I'll bring up with Dorian Williams to me is like after all of the issues with the Bills linebacking core with injuries and going into this week, the question was, let's see what Dorian Williams can do. And the wild thing to me is that come the end of this game, we're looking at the linebackers and we're not saying Dorian Williams, we're saying Joe Andreessen. And that's not me saying Joe Andreessen's better than Dorian Williams. I don't necessarily believe that's true, but it is interesting that in this game, at least, the player that shined was the undrafted free agent and not the 3rd round pick. So I think that is meaningful. I don't think it means everything in anything.
Ralph Wilson Sr. says Spectre is a player. I thought he was the author of the injury list because his name is always on the bottom of it.
That's good. That's good.
Not wrong. Not wrong. Roy Collins says Eric has not answered the meaning of life yet. Still waiting for that breakdown. You know what? We'll see if he is willing to do that. Maybe that requires its own like channel, right? I mean, we have Cover One Fantasy, we have Cover One College Football. Maybe we need like a Cover One Theology channel. That totally fits under our umbrella here at Cover One. Subscribe to One Pass, by the way. RJ says Dorian Williams has been atrocious in pass coverage. Atrocious is a lot. Atrocious is a strong word. It's not his strong suit, that's for sure. He's definitely better just sort of coming up and hitting and playing the run and being aggressive in that sense. But this is something that he needs to work on. It's the thing really that is going to be the biggest drop off, right, between Milano and Dorian Williams. Is just this pass coverage. It's tough, and this is part of why it's important to have someone like Matt Milano on your team because of what he does in pass coverage and because he's a plus run defender as well. So it's not great. Keon's jacket jockey. Is that a dagger behind Foxy? Yes, it is. Right there. It's a little dagger right there. We managed to hang that up a couple weeks ago. It had been like sitting on my dresser for ever, basically, and then it was like, hey, why don't we hang this up and put it in view? And it's like, all right, why not? So yeah, nice little dagger from Spain, by the way. Just saying, very cool. Shout out to my parents for buying that. By the way, it's very nice of them. Moving on. So, any other thoughts on Joe Andreessen or Dorian Williams, for that matter?
No, I mean, I would just say I still think that it's Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard would still be my starters. I don't think that's changed at all. It's just the depth on the Bills changing a little bit with this performance in the week 2 preseason game.
for sure. Yeah. Trying to get this to where it's not going to fall down, but it's a little tricky. Anyway, so tell you one person who played so well right off the bat, and I'm very excited because he played so well. Greg Rousseau took Broderick Jones out.
Yes.
Like, and it's funny because I follow a couple of Steelers fans and analysts who were, I don't want to say unsurprised, but they were definitely disappointed that Broderick Jones just got completely worked over by Greg Rousseau and company. But there was definitely a sense that, like, this is bad. Like, it almost felt like they were sort of dreading or anticipating this from Broderick Jones because of an elbow injury. And regardless of all that, though, right? That's just a tough thing for any player to do to a 300+ pound human being, because he straight up forklifted him like Reggie White did to that Patriots right tackle in the Super Bowl. Like, that was, as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow. Okay. As Lauren says, Greg Rousseau forgot Broderick Jones has a family. That was embarrassing.
Yeah, Greg Rousseau, when he did that, kind of changed my perspective of what I expect him to be. For a long time since he's come to the Bills, it's almost looked like he was too lanky, right? Which fits his nickname to some extent. Grew these long, like, dangly arms, basically. And that's what he's been good at, is he can kind of sit on a block and he can reach around you and reach to the side of you and grab you. That, though, when he pushed him back like that and almost knocked him off his feet, and you saw the brute strength that he has, and then you look at him a little bit, this offseason, what he looks like, what his body looks like, and he's put on some mass, and he's put on mass on his arms. And now I'm suddenly thinking, well, you have this player that's, good in certain circumstances because of his length, and you're going to add strength to that. Like, you're taking this physical freak and making him even more freaky. And I think we saw the first true signs of how dominant he could be. And injury be damned, player be damned in front of him. That performance that he had in that preseason game was one where I also said, like, whoa, wait a second here. Is Greg Rousseau that dude at defensive end? He could have a special season if that's foreshadowing what's to come.
If Greg Rousseau turns into something beyond what we've seen already, which is already pretty good, add that to a potentially healthy-ish Von Miller and AJ Epinesa being your third edge guy, it's pretty good. That's a good way to win football games, and especially when you have Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver up the middle. Yeah, I'm kind of into that. Rick Collins asks, wasn't Broderick Jones wearing a leg brace? Actually, all NFL offensive linemen wear leg braces. It's part of their requirement now, I think. There's nothing that I'm seeing right now, because I'm looking at it right now. There's no like extra leg brace or any extra thing that he's wearing that other guys are not. So in addition, on that play, he was also supposed to get chipped and get help from Najee Harris, who Greg Rousseau also just went straight through and got pressure on Russell Wilson anyway. So yeah, it was a pretty impressive performance from Greg Rousseau, who not only flashed that pass rush upside that we've been waiting on, but also showed the same strong run defense that we've seen from him through his first 3 years. So this is a really, really good sign, a really positive step forward. I'm very, very into this particular development.
Yeah, and I do think, too, I got in a little tiff earlier this offseason with a couple of Dolphins fans. Oh, surprise. Because I said I could argue that the Dolphins have the worst defensive line in the entire AFC East, to which I got a lot of flack, like, oh, Zach Seiler is so good, and Jalen Phillips, and we got these two young rookies. I agree. All these players are good, except the Bills I thought were better. I also thought the Patriots were better, and I thought the Jets could be better. But now you take Hassan Reddick off the Jets, you take Matt Judon and Christian Barmore off the Patriots, and I'm sitting here like, the Bills might have the best defensive line in the division, which I don't think a lot of people outside of Buffalo truly would ever believe, because they this defensive line just somehow consistently underrated. But Ed Oliver's really good. Daquan Jones is really good. Greg Rousseau could be really good. And to your point, if we get anything from Von Miller that's better than average, this defensive line from top to bottom is going to be very good.
It'll be better than anything he did last year, which is to say nothing. That's just part of it. Just to canoe Rousseau onto. I've never known how to say this name. You're not a basketball person, is that okay? Yeah. Whatever. You all know who this is if you're watching on YouTube. If not, if you're watching or listening to this later, I apologize, but it's some basketball player with long arms with a long last name too that I can't pronounce. So there you go. Yeah, it was just a really good performance from Rousseau. Very encouraging. On top of that, Taron Johnson, who we talked about earlier, another good game. It's exactly what we expect to have Taron Johnson. Fitting the run, being physical, being aggressive, and especially on that 3rd and long where Freiermuth tried to stiff arm him. I mean, I think Eric tweeted about this, that the way that he went about tackling him, where Freiermuth tried to put out that stiff arm, and he just swatted it down basically, and then brought him in to make the actual tackle. I mean, textbook. That is quite literally textbook how you defeat a stiff arm.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that this is the same player that in the combine got nailed in the head by a football during a drill because he wasn't ready, and to think how just like consistently good he is. It's awesome. And it's also, I'm so happy that the NFL finally made the smart decision to make nickel corner or slot corner, whatever the hell you want to call it, an all-pro specific position, because it is so different. Like if you put Taron Johnson on the outside, I would be terrified. I don't want him on as an outside corner, but in his role on this team, he's a straight up elite.
Yeah, it's exactly what he needed to be. It's exactly the position he needed to be in. It's the exact team that he needed to go to, right? I mean, how often does this actually happen where a player with some talent, with a specific sort of role and identity, ends up going to the exact team that he's supposed to go to, right? I mean, there's talented players that end up going to a team that you kind of look at and be like, Von Miller would have been successful in Denver, out of Denver, pretty much anywhere, right? The fact that this guy, who was a 4th-round pick from Weber State, he could have gone to a number of places. There were probably other teams that were looking at Taron Johnson and seeing the Bills draft him and were like, man, could have had that guy, but whatever. And the Bills have taken that and not looked back, because he's just been such a critical component of how this defense works. And it's not often that you're able to see such a perfect marriage of player, scheme, staff, all come together. It's really nice.
For sure.
Yeah. Just Tip Canoe says, I'm happy Christian Wilkins is not in the division anymore. You and me both. I got tired of letting myself get tilted by his shenanigans every time they played. He's one of those players where it's like, I know that if he was on the Bills, then I would love him and I would just run through a wall for that dude. But not just the fact that he wasn't on the Bills, but the fact that he was on the Dolphins. I'm about to sneeze, maybe, potentially. Hold on. There we go. All right. At least it was actually real this time. So, yeah, there's times where it was... I completely lost my train of thought. I'm glad Christian Wilkins is not here anymore. There we go.
I legitimately cannot wait to watch the Raiders this year. I am so excited to watch the Raiders because of Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby being on the same defensive. They are going to make anybody who plays them's life hell, and Mahomes has to play them twice. That's fine. They're going to drive him crazy. They're going to hit him over and over and over again every single game.
Yeah, and they drafted Tyree Wilson in the 1st round last year. And even though I didn't think that much of Tyree Wilson coming out, if they get kind of like Von Miller, right? If they get anything out of him, it's no longer just those two. You now have another guy that you have to contend with for a defense that, like, outside of those guys, is not overly talented.
Yeah.
but they're not like totally deficient either. And I think that they do have a really good head coach. I mean, Antonio Pierce is a good guy. I don't think he's a great head coach candidate or anything like that, but he's a good guy, and that's why he was hired. But they do have Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator, who I really, really like and have liked for a while. And I think that he provided a lot of juice for this defense last year after Josh McDaniels was fired. And I think you'll see a similar effect this year where that this defense has the potential to kind of be better than the sum of its parts, right? Like it just sort of has this feeling of like, it's not going to be a great unit in a lot of metrics, but for whatever reason, they just sort of manage to hold things down well enough to where they could stay in games. And, if Gardner Minshew can just sort of force feed Devontae Adams a bunch, then, maybe they steal a couple games here and there. Maybe one from the Chiefs. Maybe they could do that again. Please, please, please do that.
Please.
Mike Malagatar asks, how do we feel about safety? Not great. And surprisingly, that has nothing to do with Taylor Rapp, who kind of want to point this out, which is that, Russell Wilson at this point of his career is kind of only going to do two things, which is check down and then throw the occasional moon ball, and was kind of waiting for it at some point during that preseason game. And maybe the weather affected that to a point, but I was expecting at least an attempt, and we didn't see that. And I think some of that has to do with the coverage on the back end. And that has to do with Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin.
True. Yeah, I mean that's a good, that's a positive way to look at it, at least. And I think we've been saying it this entire offseason. I think that like Taylor Rapp, Damar Hamlin are a fine duo ever since let's call it the ascension of Damar Hamlin, which is a weird way to describe it considering what he went through. Anyway, so the ascension of Damar Hamlin and also Taylor Rapp, like if that's the week one starting safety duo, I'm like, I'm not overly happy about it, but it's fine. I want it to be Cole Bishop or Mike Edwards, but we can survive with those two. Now you sprinkle in the other two guys, and maybe you do that little bit of stuff we were doing with Jordan Poyer last year, and then it gets exciting, especially as the season progresses. But for now, Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, I think fine is the best word I can say to describe the two of them.
And right now, all they need to be is fine, as long as they're not a liability. That's sort of all that matters. And maybe at some point when you get Cole Bishop and or Mike Edwards involved, maybe this is a better upgrade or whatever. But for now, if the worst case scenario is Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, it's a pretty solid worst case scenario. The reality is, unfortunately, it's not the worst case scenario. They could be playing Terrell Burgess or like a 36-year-old
Kendall Williamson, Kareem Jackson.
Kendall Williamson. Yeah, Kareem Jackson. It's just like there's worse options out here. I am encouraged by the fact that Taylor Rapp is healthy and has been healthy and hasn't had any issues, and hopefully a very, very gentle knock on wood, because I don't want to knock my camera down again. Hopefully that stays true throughout the rest of the season. So.
And Kyler Murray in that first week, that's what they're going to test. I know that's what they're going to try to run the ball over and over and over again. But every once in a while, Kyler Murray is going to try to throw a deep ball to Marvin Harrison, and because that is the perceived weak spot of this Bills defense is those safeties. So they're going to get tested early. Yeah.
And they should be tested early, and there's probably going to be some growing pains through that first month, but I think overall the talent that's at particularly the first level of this defense makes me feel good enough about the defense as a whole. So there's that. You have on here that you didn't notice Kaiir Elam much. Is that a good or a bad thing? So I also didn't notice Kaiir Elam much, and the reason I think largely is because the Steelers played so much run offense, especially once Justin Fields came into the game. The other thing is that he just wasn't playing with the first team unit, And so you didn't really see a whole lot of him when they were throwing, right? So I feel like I saw him once almost undercut a Justin Fields pass for an interception.
Oh, on the right side. Yeah.
Didn't
I
quite get there. And that was like one of 4 Fields passes that could have been intercepted. Yeah. Which, for the record, I'm just going to say this as a way to sort of humble myself as well. I was a big Justin Fields guy. I was a very big Justin Fields guy. I really loved him coming out of Georgia and Ohio State. Right, I really felt like he was a good quarterback who was talented and had mobility and toughness and good arm strength. He's not that guy. He's just not that guy. It's not that any of those traits are not there. It's just that, like Mitch Trubisky, he is so slow to process everything. And because he's like genuinely tough and wants to kind of grind through everything, he's willing to hang back in the pocket and take a bunch of hits and all that sorts of things. Just like, oh man, like it almost feels like main character syndrome to a point, right? Like I can do this. I will do this. I will this team to victory.
True.
Like, but your team sucks and you need to be better at this.
Yeah. He's just not a NFL caliber passer. Like because of the processing and the decision making, like he just isn't. And he's also one of the perfect. I get in fights all the time about the term dual threat quarterback.
Yes.
Because to be a dual threat, you need to do 2 things well, and he does not. So he is not a dual threat quarterback to me. He's a running quarterback. There's a very, very stark difference between the two. Josh Allen, dual threat quarterback. Lamar Jackson, dual threat quarterback. Justin Fields, not a dual threat quarterback.
100%. Kyler Murray, dual threat quarterback.
Yes.
Like if you're going to be a dual threat, you got to be good at those 2 things. And if you're only good at one, then you're basically just Cordell Stewart, also former Steelers quarterback.
True.
Yeah, it's this whole conversation kind of started with safeties and moved to Kaiir Elam and all that stuff. Yeah, so let's just go back to Kaiir Elam. I agree. I didn't notice him all that much either. In fact, when that play happened where he almost undercut that, I was like, number 5. Why am I know that's not Marquez Stevenson, but right, Kaiir Elam changed his number to number 5, and now I have to remember that. That's dumb. But yeah, I think it's fine, right? He wasn't like getting cooked by anyone that we saw. He wasn't getting, beat up in run defense or anything. Kind of sounds like he just did his 111th, which is kind of the thing that we've been asking for Kaiir Elam to do. Do your job, be in position, do what you need to do.
Yeah, I think that this Saturday game is going to be very telling of what the Bills think of Kaiir Elam. I think it would be a benefit to him if he gets the start. And I say that because I don't think Christian Benford's going to play. I don't think Rasul Douglas is going to play. So I would want the Bills' top guys behind them, Jamarcus Ingram and Kaiir Elam, to get the start. And then I want to see how long they play. If Elam goes over a half, then I start to say, I don't think the Bills believe in this guy. And this is more of a opportunity for him to showcase himself to others. I still think he's their CB3 on the outside. He is the primary backup. But I think that whole offseason hype around him is starting to wane slightly, and it's starting to be like, yeah, could be a good depth corner, but that's about it right now.
Yeah. And right now, that's all he needs to be.
Yes.
And I think that's totally fine. So I'm totally okay with this. Someone at some point mentioned Javon Solomon. Yes, there we go. Mike Malley guitar. And Michael Donnelly, 2 mics mentioning Javon. Also, had another game of getting a couple flashes as a pass rusher for Javon Solomon, which is always good to see. Again, this is more of the depth that you want at the defensive line for a team that rotates their defensive line as much as the Bills do. Like, this is a good thing to just have someone that on third down, if somebody just needs a spell and you need just like 1 or 2 halfway decent pass rush reps, hey, you got this rookie who can win upfield with speed, and I think that's a good positive showing.
Yeah, he's been exciting, and I think he's basically locked down that roster spot too. I am interested once the season starts how the Bills go about the whole game day active, game day inactive things, because you got 5 defensive ends. I think they only activate 4. So then it's between, we know AJ Epinesa, we know Groot, and we know Von Miller are the 3 that are going to be active. Smoot and Solomon, I think it'll be kind of game dependent who's out there. And to a point, like Solomon seems like the guy that, like, if Von Miller's not working, you put him in, which would be a really, really weird thing that I don't expect the Bills to do. So I think it's between Solomon and Smoot, but fun that the Bills have an interesting prospect at that position.
Yeah. And some that's why you take a chance on someone like him, even though he is undersized.
Yeah.
Because you just know that if you can tweak a couple little things, you could be like, you've got a role player here.
Yeah.
And maybe that role player turns into something else. Maybe that turns into the next Bryce Huff, let's say, who is definitely a role player, right? Like Bryce Huff has been a role player, and he'll be a role player for the Eagles this year, but he is a really good role player. Like, he's really good in that role. So, that is sort of like a best case scenario for Javon Solomon, for him to turn into someone like Bryce Huff, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities either. So, moving on to anything else defensively you want to talk about?
No, I think we kind of nailed it. I think the story of the game was Andreessen, which was really cool and made the game actually fun for me to watch. But other than that, I think for all the hype that Andreessen's getting, I truly do think what Greg Rousseau did has me the most excited, just because that was a special performance in a meaningless game, but one that has me a little bit more hyped on what Greg Rousseau could be.
That's fair. Real quick, though. Roy Collins and Lauren both asking and commenting about Daquan Hardy, who did have a good night. Mm-hmm. And it could have been even better if he caught any of the 3 interceptions that he was in position to make. But regardless, he was in position there. And he's continuing to flash his speed more than anything else, which is a good thing. That's why they drafted him. And good overall game from Daquan Hardy. It's good to see.
Yeah, again, I said Javon Solomon's basically locked down his roster spot. I think Daquan Hardy, you can basically write it in stone like that. He will be on this roster, if not just for the nickel duties, the backup nickel, return man. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later.
We will. Moving on to the offense. So rain meant no Josh Allen, which is unfortunate, but understandable. And especially when you look at the laundry list of injuries that have taken place, you're kind of like, all right, that was the right decision. My personal entertainment of a meaningless football game does not need to be marred by the fact that Josh Allen got hurt because of some stupid freaking rain.
Yeah.
So good decision there. Outside of that, I mean, Mitch Trubisky, again, looked pretty brutal.
He didn't look good.
And also got hurt, which is unfortunate. And not a great overall showing from the offense, but they got into the red zone and into really just the red zone. I mean, they kept stalling out in the red zone. Once they actually crossed the 50 for the first time, they just sort of stalled out in the red zone and had to settle for field goals. But they did that better than the Steelers did. So good job, guys.
Yeah, that made that money line bet I had referenced earlier all the more worth it, because the Steelers couldn't finish their drives and the Bills couldn't either, but Tyler Bass could at least finish something. So, it was a really weird and boring offense. It's so weird being a Bills fan now, because that game from that Bills offense, I watched for 17 years of just miserable offensive football. And now anything short of Josh Allen fireworks, I'm like, this is disgusting. What the hell am I watching? Which is most of the other NFL games I watch, to be honest. Most of the non-Bills games, I'm like, oh my God, how can people stand this? It's like, yeah, you did that for nearly 20 years, dude. So, that game the offense sucked. They weren't good.
It did. They sucked. It was not fun for pretty much that entire first half. It got a little bit better in the second half, just because they actually leaned on the run game a little bit more, and Ray Davis in particular, who had 8 carries for 58 yards. And you're starting to see a little bit more of him pop up on the timeline, especially with fantasy guys who are like, hey, this Ray Davis guy might be something if you've got James Cook, which I do in several leagues now. So
Yeah, Ray Davis, we've talked about it, and Max Toscano, giving us the insight on him the day he was
Mhm.
drafted. He looked good, like legitimately good, which is exciting because that's what I think we expect out of him. We don't expect him to look bad, and not that he looked bad in the first preseason game, but it wasn't as fun as I thought it'd be. And this week it was. You saw a little bit of the strength, the power running, and you saw a little bit of like the quickness because he had a couple mini cuts there. So yeah, I think he's a solid RB2, and he's going to be an upgrade at the position for the Bills this year.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, right? Where they've been looking for a running back too, especially last year when they brought in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, and neither of those guys really worked out for different reasons. Now you have Ray Davis, who has just such a super physical style of running, and maybe that wears on him over time, but at least for as long as he's on the Bills, it'll work.
Which will be 4
And
years.
it'll be 4 years that Ray Davis is on the Bills. So appreciate these 4 years of Ray Davis football, Bills fans, because it's pretty much the only ones that you're going to get. Moving on, I will say something else that I liked, and that's been consistent now through the first 2 weeks of preseason with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. Screens are a thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're going to sure try to have screens be a part of this offense. Whether or not they'll execute them to meaningful, what's output? I can't think of the right word I'm looking
Outcomes.
for, but that's good enough.
Yeah.
Outcomes, sure, why not? Is a different story, but they are going to try, which is not what Ken Dorsey was doing last year.
Yeah, and that would be if that they can get that going, it's going to open up the offense. Like force those safeties to come down just a little bit because that's why we weren't getting those deep balls as much last year. And if that screen game starts working, you start getting a little more yak. You start to bring those safeties or get them to creep down, then maybe that's where Keon Coleman, he gets one-on-one on the outside and gets a step, and you just throw it up and hope he catches it. So I'm excited to see the screen game kind of be a part of the Bills offense, which I don't know what the Bills offense will be until week 1 against the Cardinals, but it's fun to see them practicing it at least.
It's something. I mean, this is a different dimension of the offense that hasn't been there before. Some of that, it wasn't a thing with Ken Dorsey. It wasn't a thing with Brian Dable. Some of that kind of has to do with Josh and his mechanics and how and his timing of how screens are executed. But if this is something that they now feel more comfortable with, and it is important to point out that the screen that they ran, the running back screen that they ran in this game was with Trubisky. Obviously, it wasn't with Allen. But still, right? Like it's a play that they clearly practiced and ran. And it's not something where it's like, oh, Mitch Trubisky is in here. Let's run a screen. It's like, it's not really how this works. Although I think that was, that probably was the sort of conversation and mentality of like, Mitch Trubisky's in here. We really can't have him throwing downfield, can we? Let's just run a screen or something. But you do that because you've practiced screens and you know how to do that. Anyway. So it's just good to be able to see that happening, to see another added dimension to this offense that has not been there in the pretty much since Josh Allen has been here.
Yeah, I will say the last thing I'll say on it too is like I still question if Josh Allen can do it well enough where it becomes an integral part of the offense. I believe that Josh Allen can do almost anything, but the screen game is a little weird fitting his skill set. And honestly, I truly do believe part of it is because he's such a prolific runner, the way that teams play defense on him, they play so close to the line and they play with all this contained mentality that if you try to throw that screen, they're already kind of in that spot anyway, where instead, if he was just a pocket passer, they'll be back a little bit more because they're not as wary of the him running the ball. So I don't know how much faith I have in them doing it, but I like that they're trying. And if it does work, it would open up the game so much.
100%. Word Collins says Samuel was supposed to be the main screen guy. Hey, maybe he still is. Turf toe notwithstanding. Yeah, it's another one of those injuries where it's just like, it's just tough. It's just tough. let's see. What else do we have here for offense? So let's talk about that Keon Coleman pass that should have been caught. First of all, should have been caught.
Yes.
I don't know why that's like a weird thing that people are trying to like. It should have been caught. That's not the discussion that needs to be had here. Like that catch, that play in particular is like why they brought Keon Coleman in, like to make those sorts of catches specifically. Whether or not you think he made like a business decision in August is, I don't know, kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get that it's preseason. I get that, it doesn't really count for anything. Also, catch the ball.
Yeah. It honestly, I don't think he made a business decision. I think in those plays, you are just, you're going so fast that you don't even think about that it's preseason. So I guess let me correct myself. I do think he made a business decision, but I don't think he did it because it's preseason. And that's what concerns me, because I want the instincts that says, I'm going to get this ball. And if he gets lit up, he gets lit up. And if he gets hurt, that's terrible and awful. But I truly don't think that that's something he was quantifying because of what this game meant. I think it was instinctually, I'm going to get those alligator arms and I'm not going to go grab that ball. And that's exactly what happened. And I would be concerned in the regular season if I see a similar slant run and Josh tries to feed it to him. I would expect him to do the same thing, because that seems like something that he's just ingrained to do. That's concerning. So I need to see him not do that before I'm going to start having faith in him not doing that, I guess is the way I'm saying it.
Yeah. You just, to see that particular play, if it had been a drop from something else, if it had been a drop with, a lot of contact or like, I don't know, just in a different spot, or just like a straight up drop when you're wide open or something like that. That's, I don't want to say I would have preferred that, but like this particular situation is like, this is why he was drafted and brought in. And when you don't make that play in the preseason, it just, makes you a little weary. It makes you a little wary about like, what is your role going to be if you're not going to make that play? It's tough. And, I'm not saying that this totally means he's going to be bad in the regular season or that he can't do that or whatever. It's just like, this is what you were brought in to do. You need to be able to make that play, and he just did it. And hopefully this is a learning moment, a teaching moment for him, as Walter S. puts here. I at least like that he was frustrated with himself after the drop, and that's fair. He should be frustrated with himself. But you got to be able to take that and actually move past that and do something with this. So hopefully that's the case with him here.
And I do think that, like, again, he should have caught the ball. I don't even think that's debatable. I don't really know. The reason people are debating it is because they don't want to blame a player that they like for something that went wrong. They'd rather blame a player they don't like, which happens to be Mitch Trubisky. And to Mitch Trubisky, he could have thrown a better ball. Like it was a good enough ball to be caught, but it could have been better, but not by much.
Could have been better, but like based on how quickly that play is happening, you're trying to just get that ball out.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're under center, you're hitting that play action, you hit that back foot, you're turning and releasing basically.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, it could have been more inside where he could have been a bit more comfortable and shielded it with his body a bit better, but still, it wasn't. It's your job as a receiver when something is not like thrown at you the way you want it to adjust to that. And especially when you're tall and long like he is, that needs to be part of your calling card. Yeah, and that's fair. It's just gotta make the play when it comes next time, right?
Yes.
As Walter S. says here, Jamar Chase dropped everything in the preseason, his rookie season, and media was questioning his hands. I think things turned out pretty well for him that season, and that's very true. This is and this is why I know it sounds like I'm harping a lot on this particular point. Really, it's largely just because it was like one of two moments for Keon Coleman. And he did catch another pass where he was wide open and got a first down, which is always good. But, it's just a lack of anything else to talk about, especially offensively, where just
There's
everything
nothing.
kind of
Yeah.
sucked, right? And this just being the sort of play that you want him to be able to make. I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm out on Keon Coleman or anything over exaggerative like that. It was just a disappointing play that I expected him and wanted him to make. He didn't make it, and hopefully in the future he makes a better catch and scores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said.
Moving on. So let's talk about the offensive line, which I think overall played better this week than they did last week. It seemed like they were a bit more cohesive, particularly in the run game. The guards, though, struggled. Osiris Torrence really struggled through his entire game that game against the Steelers. It was not all that encouraging to see. David Edwards had a couple of plays, particularly in pass protection, where he didn't get it right, let someone slip by, got beat. Like, it was not a good night for the guards.
Yeah, now that you brought up Osiris Torrence, because I completely forgot about that, but he did struggle. There were points where he was completely turned around. Like, he got turned with his back to the line. It was weird because that's something I don't remember seeing from him last year. And David Edwards struggled at points, especially picking up the blitz. That got me to thinking, is this also a Connor McGovern problem, where he's not identifying things pre-snap that a Mitch Morris was, so Mitch could protect Osiris Torrence to some extent, and maybe McGovern's not. Again, this is just theory. I did not see anything where I could specifically point out that happened. That being said, I am a little nervous that David Edwards seemingly continues to struggle, and Osiris Torrence I'm going to chalk it up to a bad game. Like, that's what I'm going to say. He had a bad game. I saw him enough last year. I'm like, this guy's good. Let's see him in the regular season. Let's see him be good. But it's definitely a concern that interior of the offensive line is struggling, while Dion Dawkins will continue to be on Dion Dawkins, and Spencer Brown seems perfectly fine and perfectly adequate at right tackle now. So to me, it's the interior that's a little concerning, though I do think holistically the Bills' offensive line, first, second, third team played better this week than they did last.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that, like, David Edwards had a couple of moments where he got beat. It felt like every time I was looking at Torrence, he was getting worked over at some point or another, which was concerning. And the offensive line as a whole played poorly against the Bears. Now you have the guards continuing that. I don't know. It's not great. And I still have faith in Aaron Cromer. And at the end of the day, you still have Josh Allen, who can mitigate those sort of mistakes up front because he's just so big and elusive and all that. But you also want these guys to play well, period. And right now they're not. Hopefully that changes once the regular season starts. But, hope isn't a plan. And they're going to have to kind of make a lot of strides in the next couple of weeks in order to make this work.
Yeah, the offense as a whole just has been very underwhelming for 2 preseason games, and it just does remind me how important Josh Allen is and how much his presence alone makes everyone better, especially even the offensive line, because to some extent those pass rushers have to think about what they're doing, maintain integrity a little bit more than you would against a Mitch Trubisky, who's still a fine runner, but he's not a Josh Allen. So when Allen comes in, I think you'll see everybody elevate. Not that we saw that against the Bears, but again, preseason game where the Bills were not going to run Josh Allen, come again, play the Cardinals. I think you see a different offense, and you see one that plays much better because number 17 is under center.
For sure. Let's see. Anything else offensively you want to talk about?
No, I just hope that, can we score a touchdown in the third preseason game? Like, I got to see
that would
the
be
line
nice. That would be a nice thing to do. They do play the Panthers.
Dude.
that gives me some hope that that's possible. We'll see, though. I'm not.
It might be the last game that the Panthers win this year. So maybe they go all out to try to do that.
The Panthers play in the NFC South. They'll win
True.
a game. I don't know against who, but they'll win a game against someone. Let's talk about special teams. I'm gonna have you read this first stat here because I know this is something that you just love.
I love this. Yeah. So as much as I kind of buried the lead there in my previous statement, but the Bills have 15 points this preseason. Tyler Bass has 15 points this preseason. He's been perfect as a kicker. I'm going to ignore the fact that most of them have been shorter than an extra point, but 5 of 5, pretty damn good, and 100% of the Bills' points. So at this point, I think you probably argue he's the MVP of the entire NFL of the preseason, considering what he's done for the Bills.
I'm not going to ignore the fact that most of those kicks were shorter than an extra point. That being said, one of them was from range, like the 45-plus yard range that he had been struggling with.
Yeah.
And he did make that. It was close, but he did make it. Close. And a made kick that's close is still a made kick when it's right down the middle at the end of the day. And I think really more than anything, just having the confidence and being able to hit all of his field goals thus far, just keep that positive momentum going. And if he goes through the third preseason game and continues to hit his field goals wherever they are, I think at least that you can kind of take into the regular season and say, hey, I made all my kicks throughout the preseason. It's been a little bit of a struggle throughout training camp. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. But it is a good positive step forward that he's able to do this and put himself in position to be the only player that scored on this team throughout this preseason. So there is that.
Yeah. I was just looking up the field goals from this game, and it's 31, 26, 27. Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, they're all makes. You know, they're not no field. Let's say I'm going to say it this way because I want to be positive and optimistic. No field goal is a gimme in the NFL, though a lot of those were. So
yes, they were. But it is what it is. You got to make the kicks that are in front of you, and so far he's done that. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that continues. Sam Martin played well. Mm. And I feel like kind of has played well. Even last week was kind of up and down. This week, in spite of bad conditions, he punted pretty well, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So he had 5 punts for an average of 53 yards. I'll say he did give up like a couple returns of, 10 plus yards, meaning likely a little bit too low on the airtime. But with the conditions the way they were, with the rain and wind and all that fun stuff, at 53 yard average on your punch, pretty damn good. So that's good thing for the Bills kicking game, at least.
Yeah. It's at the very least you're able to, I don't know, not feel bad every single time that Sam Martin comes up, which was kind of how I felt last year. And if I'll be fair to myself and how I'm framing this. If I'm going to sit here and say that the good things that have happened with Tyler Bass are things that I hope continue throughout the regular season, I also hope that Sam Martin's punting continues throughout the regular season. I'm not exactly going to expect it either. It's certainly possible where there's a struggle here and there. And, maybe it happens with other types of weather. It was rainy, but it wasn't exactly windy, which is more of the problem in Buffalo. And as that's something that Roy Collins points out here, which is that he had trouble kicking in the wind. True. And hopefully in those situations, they're not put into so many positions where they have to do that to begin with. But that's part of the nature in Buffalo, is that you're going to have to deal with wind. You're going to have to deal with inclement weather, and not just wind, but just like weird wind too.
Yeah. I will say, I think Greg Thompson was the one that tweeted this out. It might have not been him, but I'll give him credit, at least for now, that It might be a good thing quietly for the Bills that they're not exactly confident in their punter and kicker, because maybe that means more fourth down. Let's just go for it. We got this dude that can probably get it, so might as well. And then suddenly you score more touchdowns. So there could be a positive there. I still would rather have the utmost faith in both my kicker and punter when they come on the field.
Yeah, I agree. Daquan Hardy, return man, kind of the main reason why he was drafted, and he's been fine. And there hasn't been anything overly spectacular with kick returns during this preseason for the Bills or for anyone. And I think that despite the rule changes that have been made, I think that this is more something that has to do with the fact that teams don't really want to show what they have just yet, which is fine. And I think that with the way that Hardy has played throughout on returns and also on defense with the second and third units, like you said, like we talked about earlier, I think that he's kind of locked in a roster spot here at this point.
Yeah, my only concern with him was on that one punt return where he ran backwards and he ended up escaping the tackle, and I think he ended up picking up 5-6 yards, something like that. But getting that close to the end zone was pretty concerning. I'm sure Sean McDermott wasn't happy about that. I know that happens a good amount in the few college football games I watch. I watch return men run backwards all the time. That doesn't work as well in the NFL just because the speed that these defenders and these coverage players have is so much greater than those in college, that it does concern me that he did that. I'm sure the Bills are coaching him and saying, do not do that. But who knows with the Bills special teams coach what the hell he's saying to any of these people.
That is very fair, honestly. Anything else that we want to talk about before we get out of here?
I'm so done with preseason. Like, I want the season to start, man. And we still have it's like 3 weeks until the first game.
Something like that. Yeah. We've got preseason this week, and then next Thursday is the Chiefs and the Ravens.
No, there's a week break in between.
Is there?
I think so. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Now I'm not sure. Hold on. Let me have my my producer.
September 5th is the Chiefs game. So
September 5th is the Chiefs game.
Yeah.
Oh, God, there is a week in between.
All right, we got to get to the regular season.
I see. This was the point where I would say, oh, but there's college football, but you don't care about college football. So
no, I'm not watching that garbage.
All right. That is going to do it for us here tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate each and every one of you for being here, for interacting with us, for joining and supporting us throughout this preseason and hopefully throughout the rest of the regular season. Very happy to have all of you along with the ride, and hopefully it will end up being a good ride this season for the Bills. And you can find all the work that we do here at Cover One. You can subscribe down below. You can hit the like if you enjoyed this video. If you didn't, do it anyway, because it really helps us. And we really appreciate those who are able to support us and help us in that way. And share this with your friends, enemies, lovers, neighbors, etc. You can follow us on different social medias. You can follow the different channels that we have, including this particular channel and also Cover One Fantasy, where Chris Chuse is doing all sorts of stuff. And if you are drafting in your fantasy leagues, like I had to do twice this weekend, probably a good place to get some good fantasy advice, because that dude puts in the work. He's good guy, good analyst, good place to get your fantasy advice. Uber, where can the people find you?
Yeah, they can find me at UberHansen on Twitter. I've been especially drunk lately tweeting nonsense. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, then that's the person you want to follow, that person being me. Other than that, though, content-wise, I've previewed the Patriots, the Dolphins, and the Jets so far this offseason. So I have one more AFC East team to do, which will be this week, and that will be the Buffalo Bills. So very excited about that post to come out on si.com/ twitter.com/NFL/Bills later this week.
You can find me at DFAUXY on Twitter. You can also find me writing for SI.com. I'll be doing recaps after each game and the occasional article here and there about something else, whatever floats my boat that particular week or grinds my gears or both, just to say. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you all next week after yet another riveting preseason game of action against the Carolina Panthers. Thank you all for joining. We will see you then. Bye-bye.